you can just, if you could just all give us a couple of more minutes while we let folks trickle in. We are going to start right in the next minute or two, since there's such a jam-packed agenda tonight. I want to make sure we get through all of it and to be able to get to the Q&A at the end for all of your questions. So just give us a minute, let folks in. Give us a minute. Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started. This meeting is being recorded, which is great. That way, if there are any parts of it that individuals missed, we will be able to make sure that you are able to watch it later on once we share it afterwards. So sorry if we're starting really quickly. Again, we have a very packed agenda tonight, so we want to make sure we have the chance to get to it all. Thank you all for being in our forum tonight. We're really excited to have an incredible panel of leaders, of individuals who have been working really hard across numerous different entities, organizations, and agencies in our city and in our region to really address the homelessness crisis. So I'm really thankful to be sharing space with everyone tonight. And without further ado, we will just quickly flag that if we have interpretation available, we're still trying to figure out the kinks of it. These are the instructions for interpretation. Right now, we are able to track who has requested interpretation. So if you have not requested interpretation but would like to access Spanish interpretation, please feel free to put it in the chat. We have staff members who will connect you with the interpreter via phone as well. That way you can get interpretation in real life and in real time, since we're unable to figure out some of the tech quirks right now. And then I quickly wanted to go through the agenda. As I mentioned, it's going to be really, really robust. So we have the council member giving remarks in a minute. And then after that, we will have a lovely presentation by Director Keika on behalf of the City of San Diego's Homelessness Strategies and Solutions Department. And then we'll be tossing it over to the San Diego Housing Commission on the Homelessness Services Overview, which is going to go over so many different pieces of the work that's being done, a lot of different partners, and even that not all the partners that are involved, but as many as we can make space for tonight. And then we're hoping that we can have a lot of space for panel Q&A at the end. So we wanted to make sure that you all are aware there's a good 40 minutes or so that we're trying to allot. We have all the way until 8 o'clock to really run this through for tonight's forum. But there is a good hour of information sharing just because there are so many different partners that are going to be present tonight. And I wanted to just shout out some of the organizations that are here. We have people assisting the homeless, or PATH, the Regional Task Force on Homelessness. Both the city and the county's respective departments on homelessness are here as well. We have neighborhood policing departments captain present. We have the Housing Commission, and then we also have a member on the Regional Task Force of Homelessness who is also involved and runs his own organization of All of Us or None San Diego chapter. So there's a lot of different stakeholders who are present tonight. We just wanted to honor all the different ones who are able to make it with us. So without further ado, I'm going to stop screen sharing and toss it over to the council member for opening remarks.
Thank you, Marianne, and thank you so much to everyone who's here with us tonight. First, our constituents, residents of District 9, for showing up, for being engaged in your community, for caring about your community. We really appreciate that. And then for all of our partners who are here tonight, I think what you see is not just a number of folks with technical expertise about the work of dealing with and solving our homelessness crisis, but really, really good people who are invested in seeing a solution and doing the really complex work of, and sometimes very difficult work of collaborating across multiple, way too complicated systems and bureaucracies in order to make progress on a problem that's plagued San Diego and the country for way too long. I'll just briefly share that, and some of the folks who are here know this issue is personal to me, and I want to own that. It's personal to me because of the experiences of myself, of my family. Growing up, we had situations where a hotel room or a family member's couch was the best that we could do in terms of a place to lay our heads at night. I had to turn to the backseat of a '94 Explorer during my first few months of here in San Diego when times got tough. And so I share that again because I want to just own that this is an issue of personal importance to me, but also because that personal experience does very much inform my sincere belief that being a person who experiences homelessness is something that can happen to any one of us. And it is not in and of itself a reflection of someone's character. And so I just want to own that part up front and be transparent about my personal experience and beliefs. I also want to though own the part about this being a problem that is sorry about the background noise, y'all. But this is a problem that is really challenging on a number of fronts. I know that for people in neighborhoods throughout the city, there are concerns about safety, about health, and those are justified, and we hear you and we see you when you bring those concerns to us. It's also deeply uncomfortable. People being unsheltered and dealing with the various ailments that are often associated with or seen within the community of folks experiencing homelessness can be disconcerting to us. It can be tough to see. It can rattle us, especially when we're concerned about the safety and health of our families. So I want to recognize that part as well. So District 9, our office, shows up to our jobs every day with a commitment to seek long-term solutions to this crisis, and also recognize that it is not unreasonable for someone to want to see immediate progress. We are committed to that, but we don't want to do that at the cost of being able to score a political point today, knowing full well that we're not doing the hard work of dealing with the problem of the long term. So that does not mean we lack for urgency. I guarantee you that is not the case. There are few things that bother me more than being a council member for a city where we have folks sleeping on the streets. I will not feel successful in my job until that is no longer the case. That is a sincere decision of mine. But I also don't think there's quick fixes. And I think that the folks who are here tonight to kind of walk you through the work that is being done, and we get that question a lot, what is happening today to solve this problem, not what is the long-term plan. I think you'll see they are very committed, they're working very hard, and will, I'm sure, own the fact that while our progress has been, well, there has been progress, it's not happening fast enough, and we're all committed to seeing it happen faster. So I don't want to take too much more time. I just want to say thank you again to everyone who has taken the time to be an engaged community member and be here tonight. I want to send a special appreciation to all the partners who are here to share their expertise, their knowledge, and their care with us. And I look forward to you all as community members engaging, and asking your tough questions, and hopefully us being able to answer them. Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you, Councilmember. I appreciate that. And without further ado, we're going to toss it over to Director Keiko with the City of San Diego.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Councilmember Ila Rivera, for your leadership. We are so grateful to have such leadership in the space of homelessness and housing. So first of all, I do want to also thank all of our partners who are in this together. It really is a village. And I know it sounds like a cliche. We hear it so many times, but Tamara and I have we've worked in this field and in our network. We know it really takes a collaborative approach. And so I just want to be able to, again, say thank you so much to SDHC and, of course, SDP and all of the folks in PATH and all of our providers and, of course, the leadership. So with that being said, I just would like to give a little bit of clarity as to this new department. Most importantly is the fact that one of the differences as it relates to the city of San Diego in itself in addressing homelessness is the establishment of a new department called the Homelessness Homelessness Strategies and Solutions Department. And this is important because oftentimes, just a little bit of intro to myself, I've had a few conversations with some folks, but I've had the blessing of being able to work all throughout Southern California, from LA to Orange County to Riverside, and now most recently being appointed by Mayor Gloria in the mayor's office to address homelessness in this new role. Building capacity to address this is a bold move. And I think that's what's really important. And a lot of different cities throughout, not only California and the nation, don't necessarily have that. So for our council members like Ila Rivera, and of course the mayor, to have an infrastructure where you have a department to address this head on with capacity building and technical assistance is very important. Two pieces to this new department is the programs division as well as the monitoring and outcomes division. And I like to say that because people often ask, what is that for? We know we have many programs and services and wonderful partnerships, but we also know that we need to make sure that our programs and services are working, and that what you have to say is being heard. And so we are looking forward to utilizing this new capacity to begin to look at a data-driven approach on all of our programs and services, and in partnership with the San Diego Housing Commission and all of our partners. So with that being said, I do want to rewind a little bit. Mayor Gloria has made addressing homelessness a priority. And in that, it is really important to start with the value system. One of the reasons why I decided to come to San Diego, the value system of ensuring that it is people-centric, housing first, and with best practices. Oftentimes, we want to be able to just see it, get it done. And that is very important, but understanding and level setting the fact that this is a human issue is really important. And sometimes it takes a lot of time and a lot of work. So I'm blessed to be in the company of such wonderful experts here today who understand critical time invention, motivational interviewing, best practices on how to establish rapport with people experiencing homelessness and helping them getting engaged to self-sufficiency. So with that being said, one of the most important things to know is that $10 million have been invested. Mayor Gloria has prioritized American Rescue Act funds for that. Of that include shelter capacity, and not just any shelter capacity. I think what makes San Diego very different, and in leaning on all of the different districts, is utilizing an approach that is strength-based, which means that we assess what the needs are. So these shelters, we already have existing shelters, which the Housing Commission and all of our partners have been doing an incredible job day in and day out to sustain. But what's important is also look, what is the need out there? What are some of the things that we've heard? We've heard there's been quite a few concerns about mental health and substance abuse and medical issues and additional chronic challenges. So with that being said, the city is in partnership with the county here. I see Deanna on there as well, and the new homelessness department. We are going to be partnering to establish shelters that are more privy to mental health and substance abuse communities. And that we hope is going to able to address challenges that you see on the chronic level. So that's something excited that we have been working on, and that we've dedicated these funds as a tangible activated intervention. Also, I'd like to ensure that we go ahead and look at all of our efforts through the website and from the mayor's office, as well as the new department, because you will have an understanding of essentially the rapid rehousing funding, the prevention and diversion funding that we've been doing, the shelter capacity, additional outreach. I've been here now 3 months, and within that 3 months, I do want to highlight just a few things before we hand it over to our wonderful partners here. In August, we began to have these conversations about the community harm reduction outreach and shelter, as well as the safe havens, and we've been working very hard with that. And in August, we also went ahead and connected with the county, especially with our partnership with Housing Commission on vaccines with the public health and COVID, and mitigating as much of the COVID infections as possible as we did see an uptick. In September, we worked with the Housing Commission for the new project for the Sea Heart Shelter and substantiated Alpha as one of the partners, and really also engaging PATH and increasing the outreach with the rapid response team, which we see that is really working to help address people get into housing. Mayor Gloria did also have an opportunity to meet with Secretary Fudge, and this is important because on a local level, it takes funding, and by advocating for these funding on the federal and state level, we're able to build capacity to create the programs and services. We also announced in September that about $103 million in rent and utility assistance supported over 12,000 San Diegans. And then of course, October is what is a highlight of today. We did have concerted efforts with outreach from our partnership with the Housing Commission and PATH and many of our provider bases. I know Jonathan, you led that, and Ketra, and we were able to help 118 clients in D9 with 20 clients enrolled in outreach engagement, and really provide also vaccine administration, as well as getting many folks connected to the larger behavioral health. So that took some planning, but we were really excited to do it for the D9 district. And then lastly, I do want to say in October, one of the things that we did as a new outreach was bring in a provider called CityNet to work specifically under the Caltrans properties, because we know that that is a dangerous situation, and we really were able to look at our state funding to be able to make that happen, so that our provider bases are not being stretched thinner and thinner, and we're increasing capacity. And then lastly, I do want to say in November, we're working very closely on trying to establish inclement shelter. And most recently, this new department was accepting of $27.5 million from the state to administer additional homeless housing assistance prevention funds that you'll see come into fruition in the next couple of years. So we also utilize our Get It Done, and we ask you to use the Get It Done app as an easy access and really infusing equity into the process. So that in a nutshell, in my short 3 months that we've been able to see a lot of change, but we know that there is more change that needs to be done, and we lean on these wonderful experts. So with that being said, I know Marianne gave me about 10 minutes, but I wanted to use less of that. So I just want to go ahead and again say thank you all. This new department is really here to support the work and the collective collaborative work of everybody and make it more accessible with equity and a perspective. So with that being said, I'll put it back to you, Marianne. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Director Keika. Appreciate it so much. And I will toss it over to the Housing Commission. This is going to be a really exciting opportunity to hear from so many different partners. As Director Keika mentioned, there is a lot of folks who are working on this together. So I encourage you all, I know someone has already dropped a question in the chat, so please keep dropping your questions in the chat. When we have the panel Q&A, we will try to get to them as much as we can. So without further ado, tossing it over to the Housing Commission.
Thanks so much, Marianne. Really appreciate it. And thank you all of you for joining tonight and for giving us your time, and looking forward to having robust discussions once we follow up with this presentation. You're going to hear again and again these comments around partnership and collaboration, and these aren't just platitudes. This is how we get the work done. This is a presentation that's on a Housing Commission PowerPoint, but the fact is this involves county, the RTFH, the city, the homeless service providers. It takes everyone pulling together to do this work, and as the work changes, and frankly, in some ways, in some areas is getting harder, making sure that we are aligning resources across multiple social systems of care is just critical to create the interventions that are going to best reach people and meet their needs, which also impacts and solves the community's needs as well. So I am remiss in saying that my name is Lisa Jones. I'm Executive Vice President of Strategy for the San Diego Housing Commission, which involves overseeing our Homeless Housing Innovations Division, our agency's strategic planning efforts, and also working and facilitating with some key partners here, the Community Action Plan on Homelessness. You have implementation team members here, Tamara Kohler and Hafsa Keika, and representatives from the county as well. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. I also have Jonathan Herrera, our Special Programs Manager and Senior Policy Advisor with us, and Ketra Carter, and they're spending some time with us as well. But as we go through this presentation, it's really going to be a conversation with our partners and having them really share what they're doing and what we're doing together. I just wanted to take a moment and frankly honor and thank Councilmember Elo Rivera for his transparency and conversation around how complex this issue is. And, you know, you're going to hear the words person-centered care a lot, and person-centered care matters. And it may sound a little bit like all of the compassion is towards people experiencing homelessness, and that we should feel compassionate about that. It's any one of us can end up there, but we also need to work on interventions that meet people's needs so that we can reduce the impact on our communities as well. So there's a balance to that, and there's a balance to making sure that we're meeting the needs of our housed residents and our unhoused residents. And I just I really appreciate the council member opening the conversation that way and sharing that with us. So thank you for that. I think person-centered approaches are going to come up again and again in our conversation because it's how we move the needle. Jonathan, let's jump to the next slide. So just to give a very brief background on the Housing Commission, we provide federal rental assistance. So we provide rental assistance to nearly 16,000 households throughout the city of San Diego. We create and preserve affordable housing, issuing bond financing and gap financing, preserving housing that might otherwise be redeployed as higher private market housing. And we work on solutions to address homelessness along with all of our partners. The Homeless Housing Innovations Division actually need to revise that. Our budget has increased since it was approved in July 2021, is $127 million for that division's budget, more than 50 contracts with operators throughout the city of San Diego. And those programs include shelter, storage centers, resource centers, coordinated outreach, safe parking, rapid rehousing programs, transitional housing programs, permanent supportive housing, prevention, diversion, workforce development, and we'll talk a lot more about that as well and why that matters, and systems investment along with our partners at the Regional Task Force on Homelessness. So a broad range of services and also longer term investments to make sure that our strategies are successful over time. Some of this funding comes from the city, some of it comes from the federal government, some of it comes through COC funds. It's a variety of funding sources, and some of it comes from Housing Commission local funds. So we want to talk a little bit about the Community Action Plan on Homelessness, because it's a document that I personally feel and the Housing Commission feels is unique among documents, and it really spurred a lot of work for our commission, for the city, and for the region around creating a plan that wasn't just another report, but I refer to it as a plan with legs, and I'll talk about that a little bit. This Community Action Plan on Homelessness was accepted by the San Diego City Council in October 2019. Interesting timing when you consider that COVID really hit our region just later in spring of 2020. So definitely some interesting conversations around how that affected the Community Action Plan. There are 5 foundational strategies: implementing systems level planning, creating client-centered systems, so that person-centered approach, increasing prevention and diversion resources, so creating upstream responses so that people never fall into homelessness in the first point. And that is really going to be critical for long-term success, is making sure that we are stemming the flow into homelessness on that front upstream level. Improving system performance, so looking at what already exists in our system and how do we make it more effective, how do we better utilize it, and then increasing housing production. It identified 3 near-term or short-term goals: 1 to decrease unsheltered homelessness, 1 to end veterans homelessness, and 1 to prevent and end youth homelessness. And these are really what we consider near-term goals that were achievable in a 3 to 4 year period. The plan itself is a 10-year plan, and frankly, it's hard to maintain momentum towards a 10-year plan. So there was a lot of work that was done to specifically address that. And Jonathan, I think that's on the next slide, but before we jump, we'll talk about sort of what that system looks like. Engagement in services, examples including street outreach, which we've talked about a little bit, housing navigation, day services, coordinated entry system, and we'll talk more about what that means, community-based services, then a crisis response and stabilization, which is those emergency responses, emergency shelter, transitional housing, respite care, and then longer term interventions. So upstream interventions around prevention, diversion, low income housing, supportive housing options, short-term and longer-term rental assistance, community-based case management, family reunification. Those are also long-term or permanent options. I want to note that 4 or 5 years ago, one of the conversations that was always happening in our city was related to how do we choose or balance between immediate crisis response versus long-term housing investments. And that was a constant give and take and balance. Where do we spend our dollars, right? How does the city allocate funds? Because of COVID, one of the unique opportunities that's come from that is there is funding at a state and a federal level in unprecedented ways. There's more funding coming from the state, more funding coming from the federal government than there ever has before. We are no longer in a situation where we have to choose between those two options of crisis response or long-term investments in housing. We have the opportunities right now to do both. And that is a unique opportunity and an investment that we are talking about a lot as subject matter experts, as recommendations to our policymakers who really align this funding across the city council, across the county board of supervisors, across other funding agencies to make sure that we're plugging in where we need to in creating those investments. Jonathan, can we jump to the next slide? So I want to talk just briefly about our governance structure for the Community Action Plan on Homelessness. You have several members of the Leadership Council here today. I want to call out John Brady from Lived Advisors, who is on the Leadership Council, Tamara Kohler, the CEO of the Regional Task Force on the Leadership Council. We are also very privileged to have her on the implementation team for this work. We have Hafsa Keika here from the city as part of the implementation team. The mayor himself sits on the Leadership Council. Chair of the County Board of Supervisors, Nathan Fletcher, sits on the Leadership Council. Our CEO sits on the Leadership Council, and we also have representatives from folks from philanthropy and from business. And this Leadership Council is really an opportunity for leaders across our region to come together and problem solve and provide guidance to the implementation team to carry this work out. And the interagency implementation team was built originally from the founding members that helped usher the initial plan into being, worked with our consultant, which was a national consultant, to do this work, and really built on that to create an implementation team that was actually tasked for doing the work and sort of guiding the work of the Community Action Plan. We also have a project manager employed by the Housing Commission that is responsible for managing this project over time. And that's unique. A lot of times plans or reports are developed, but there's no clear identification of who's responsible for what, who's going to do what, who do we hold accountable for the work and for the expected outcomes and the goals. And so setting up the implementation team and the Leadership Council has been a clear part of that. There are very specific goals identified for 3 years and for 10-year marks that we are working towards. And we also have on our website, and when I'm done and pass it over to Tamara in just a couple of seconds here, I'll also drop some information in the chat that shows where those progress at a glance reporting dashboards are. You'll find that a real focus is making data-driven decisions and also creating transparency. We stood up as an implementation team and Leadership Council, those Community Action Plan dashboards, so that community and public at large and policymakers could at any time check in and see how we are performing towards those goals. There's some really positive stuff that you'll find on the dashboard. There's also challenges, right? So we truly believe that it's really important to talk about the challenges and the areas where maybe we're not having success, because if we don't talk about them, we can't solve for them, right? And so that's part of giving the public and our policymakers the opportunity to hold everyone collectively accountable to the work. Just want to note some really good positives. One of the items that was identified as key was the number of permanent supportive housing needed in a 10 years time. The consultant that worked with us then broke it down to the permanent supportive housing need that would need to be developed in the first 4 years. We are about 2 years into this process. The housing need is 1,681 that was identified at the time. We are currently working towards 95% of that goal already in the first 2 years, which is exciting. The caveat to think about is that COVID has created some unprecedented challenges for people that are in housing and for people who are not, and also for people who may have lost housing, both from a housing standpoint, from a behavioral health standpoint. It's created mental health challenges for many of us, whether we're housed or not. So one of the conversations that's on the mind of the implementation team and the leadership council is doing some recalibration of the need to make sure that we're staying current. So I'm not going to talk too much more about successes. You see that in front of you. I really want to hand it over to Tamra. The RTFH has done an incredible job on leading around equity and equity-driven approaches, because that's a key component of creating successful programs. Tamra, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you, Lisa. And I too am honored to be a part of this discussion. Councilmember Elo Rivera has not only does he have the heart and the understanding of this, but he also served on the Regional Task Force Board for 2 years. And during that time, he had really lifted up the importance of understanding our populations and the disparities that existed there. We have a very important committee that informs the city's work in addressing homelessness amongst Black San Diegans. You have 2 of those members are also participating, Curtis Howard, Hanan Scraper, and they are doing phenomenal work that will be lifted up from people, from a person-centered approach, to really help us understand how people's individuals' experiences are with our systems and how they are working or not working for them, and how we can improve their access and end their homelessness more intentionally, more culturally competent, and with a greater lens of balancing out those disparities as well. And so, Councilmember, we are honoring that work and continuing to do incredible work, and you're going to hear some of that. So I'm going to let Curtis and Hanan, when we're on the panel piece, talk about that. We also are doing work around the senior population. I don't know if you've seen some of the reports that have come out. About 1 in 4 of our unsheltered population are 55 or older, and that has a unique and different challenge. You see these individuals also on the streets. We need to do a better job of targeting some of our resources and attention towards addressing our senior population as well. Also in the city plan, the focused work around the intersection between health and homelessness. We use the committees that are part of the regional task force to really lean in there. And then finally, the great work around TAY, or the transitional age population, that is a 14 to 24, and our veterans. So we're looking at our work from a person-centered lens to where we're trying to target those interventions to the needs of individuals and the housing resources that are absolutely appropriate and tailor their needs, and make sure that we're focused on the best outcomes and to address as many of those needs as we can with the lens of equity, justice, and really addressing those disparities. And all of that great work that's happening informs and influences the city's work, but also the entire region. And I'm just going to echo something that Lisa said and Hafsa said. This is a collaborative approach. So each of us, from our own role of influence, responsibility, authority, and our funding, are focused collectively on this work. And you're seeing some of the pieces you also hear from the county that are really leaning in the behavioral health needs to really address those on the street. And so the city plan gives us this guiding work, a leadership group that really leans into it, but it's a very person-centered approach. And also being able to bring this information to communities, we want it to be a community-based approach as well. And so your questions and feedback are also critical to making sure that this plan is meeting the needs in your communities as well. With that, I'll give it back to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Tamara. Sorry, I was trying to, it says I'm muted. Can people hear me? Are we good?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Jonathan, let's jump to
yep.
the next.
So the Coordinated Street Outreach Program is comprised of all city-funded outreach teams and really supports the goal of reducing unsheltered homelessness as outlined in the Community Action Plan. The program includes operating agreements with Alpha Project, Downtown San Diego Partnership, Father Joe's Villages, PATH, and the San Diego LGBT Community Center. With the implementation of this specific intervention, the City and Housing Commission took it as an opportunity to adopt a strategy that really focused on the quality of client engagements versus an overarching emphasis on the quantity of client engagements. Really provided an opportunity to also strategically coordinate outreach services across the city. Another critical piece that enabled us to deploy street-based case management resources, to create neighborhood-based outreach teams, as well as to respond to both individual and community requests for services. A few key features of the service model include a focus on consistent, proactive client engagement, maintaining low barrier operations, facilitating connections to supportive services, emergency shelters, and permanent housing solutions, and assisting clients in meeting their basic needs and improving their sense of safety. So to that end, the program employs two distinct but complementary functions. The first is the mobile homeless response team, and these personnel are assigned to a specific neighborhood or council district to cover. And these individuals prioritize engaging clients that are highly vulnerable or potentially connected to a housing resource. Staff that engage clients are responsible for providing this consistent street-based case management, which includes crisis intervention, diversion counseling, and system navigation. On the other hand, we have the rapid response team. These individuals focus in areas that they focus their activities in areas with known concentration of individuals experiencing homelessness. And they are the ones that respond to service requests received through the Get It Done app, as well as client referrals that come in through 211 San Diego. And their work really revolves around immediate solutions, problem-solving conversations, and when necessary, connections to emergency resources. Outreach activities occur throughout the city on a daily basis, 7 days a week, including after-hour coverage up till 10 p.m. and on the weekends. Partnerships, as we've discussed, and cross-jurisdictional collaboration is a critical aspect of the work we do, and specifically around outreach efforts. This includes an array of homeless service partners, the County of San Diego, and the San Diego Police Department's homeless outreach team. So with that, I want to provide an opportunity to turn the presentation over quickly to with PATH, who's actually the organization that manages the citywide rapid response team, and also has staff assigned to the council district who's providing ongoing case management services. I think we have Hanan and maybe Brian with us this evening.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. I think Brian did join. Yeah, I think Brian can touch on, Lisa and Tamara touched on the fact that we do use a person-centered approach, and we've adopted a regional approach in terms of outreach and what works with the humans that we're trying to connect with in our community, and using a very person-centered approach and neighborhood specific, so that we're engaging people and recognizing that people we're seeing on the street have declined significantly in terms of their health and have chronic health conditions, mental health needs, and substance use needs, and really looking at a very rounded approach of what will work for that person, and taking a no wrong door approach, and really helping folks address what will really help them get into housing. And Brian, if you want to touch more in terms of like what the team has been doing.
Don't have a whole lot to add to that. I think we're really trying to do what you just said, Hanan, and I think that Brett Weiss had a really good kind of explanation of what it looks like in the chat. We try and we try and we try again to get people into housing. More often than not, it's a challenge finding the resources to get people connected, but oftentimes too, it's people are mistrusting of working with the system. That can happen over years and years of living out on the street. So yeah, we just try to cut through that. We had a good experience today where we went out and met with some folks who'd already talked to various different agencies and law enforcement and so forth, and we really try to think about what the homeless action plan discusses. It specifically says go out and offer things people can use. So like very tangible solutions, we try to do that. And then we really try to build trust with people. So those are really kind of our key focal points as we're doing this work. And we've seen, I think, really good results as, through that.
Thank you, Path. Another critical partner in the work we do across the city is the County of San Diego. And with us, we have Deanna Beck with the Office of Homeless Solutions at the County of San Diego. Give her an opportunity to chime in.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is Deanna Beck. I'm the Acting Deputy Director for the Office of Homeless Solutions under County's new Department of Homeless Solutions and Equitable Communities. I want to echo everyone on the call today about the increased collaboration. We are all working together on this tremendous issue, but more than ever, we're seeing more cross collaboration between the city and the county and all of our partners. With our new department launched on July 1st, we, however, even before that, have had an existing relationship and partnership with City of San Diego and provided support in many different ways. We partner with all of the city's outreach teams to deliver self-sufficiency programs directly to the folks on the street, connecting them with essential resources such as food and access to food and healthcare and those types of services. We also provide support in the city's shelters, bridge shelters. We have social workers who are working alongside service providers as well as other partners to help folks get into housing. And then we also have our public health nurses who are providing communicable disease prevention, testing, vaccinations, not only in the shelters, but also with the outreach teams out in the community, countywide, as well as, of course, City of San Diego. So those are just a few examples. Of course, we are working with the city on new interventions. We know that there are other interventions that don't exist today that we are working to start. I know Hafsa touched on that, having some of our behavioral health services teams that are going to be joining the outreach crew out there with some focused harm reduction prevention strategies, as well as the new harm reduction shelters that are coming on board. So that's going to be a new resource that's coming in partnership between city and the county. We also have recently added our mobile crisis response teams to Central Region. Those are not specific to the homeless population, but of course touch across that population in many ways. And those teams provide non-law enforcement response, differential response to those experiencing mental health crises. So those are just a few examples of many things that county is working on and bringing forward as part of our, we just recently approved our board approved the new framework for ending homelessness earlier in November. We're very excited about county finally having a plan that kind of puts all of these interventions into a streamlined and coordinated way. So we are very excited to operationalize that framework. We've started already, like I mentioned, in many ways, but we are rolling out services not only within the city of San Diego, but also countywide in all the other regions. So we're very excited to bring all of that forward and work collaboratively with everyone. And so I'll stop there and of course be available for any questions that may come up that are related to the county.
Thank you, Deanna. Want to take some time to turn it over to Captain Takeuchi with Neighborhood Police Division, who oversees the homeless outreach team, also a very critical partner in the work that we do.
Thank you, Jonathan. Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Takeuchi, and I'm a captain with the San Diego Police Department, and I currently oversee the Neighborhood Policing Division for the department. This division exists to be a tool, be a collaborative partner that everyone has been mentioning to really reach out to those that need the most help. And it's those unhoused individuals in our community. So a section of my division is the HOT team, and that acronym, the HOT team, has been used a lot, and many of you may have seen it in the media. It stands for the Homeless Outreach Team. And what that is it's 2 teams, a total of 16 officers, and we work 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and we go to various communities in the entire city of San Diego. What we do differently is that our HOT teams, we have other partners on the team. We've got the PERT team, which is a psychiatric emergency response team. It is a mental health clinician, and we have 3 PERT clinicians that are attached to our team. And what they do is they help when officers go out and contact an individual and an officer believes that the person has mental health issues, then we have that PERT clinician right next to us that can help diagnose, help build that bridge, build that trust with that individual, and try to get that individual to accept services, and in best case scenario, to accept shelter placement. So we have PERT clinicians with us. The other component that we have with our team are benefits specialists from the County of San Diego Health and Human Services Department. Those benefits specialists, they help us because when we contact an individual, those benefits specialists, they utilize the county resources and try to connect with that unhoused person, again, to establish trust, to build trust, but more importantly, to try to get the benefits that that person may be entitled to. Again, it just goes a long way when we can build these trusting relationships with individuals, because we understand that many of these folks have had bad experiences with law enforcement, and it may take time. And so we are going to use that time the best we can to build that relationship. The other thing that the HOT team or the HOT officers do differently is they are not dressed in the traditional police uniform that I'm wearing today, and what many of you may know for a police officer to be dressed in. These HOT officers, they actually wear a polo shirt, they wear tan khaki pants, they do have a gun belt, so they do have the tools available to them, but we have them dressed differently to build that bridge with that unhoused person, to establish that trust, to establish that connection, so that in hopes of that person getting the help that they need, accepting the services we have, accepting shelter placement that we will always offer. What I preach with the HOT team is tenacity, is that we may be told no today, but tomorrow we may be told yes, or we may be told we want help, but we also may be told no again. But if we stay tenacious and we continue to offer that service that we have, to offer the shelter that we possibly can get them, then we know that we may succeed one day. So that is our HOT team. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain. So as part of the outreach team's ongoing field assessment, they canvass the community and maintain a record of areas with high concentration of individuals experiencing homelessness. In instances where there's an active encampment or a large congregation of unsheltered individuals, the Housing Commission will coordinate a focused outreach event to facilitate a multidisciplinary and cross-jurisdictional approach to engaging these individuals. These events are coordinated in conjunction with the assigned outreach team, the County of San Diego, a federally qualified health center, and when appropriate, the San Diego Police Department's homeless outreach team. Between October 19th and October 28th, a focused outreach event was hosted in Council District 9 to engage in encampment along Home Avenue, as well as a few priority areas that we were made aware of in the Hollywood Park neighborhood. The event included 16 staff from 8 partner organizations, including the Regional Task Force on the Homeless, the County of San Diego, La Maestra Community Health Centers, and San Diego Police Department HOT, as well as, again, the outreach teams that are specifically assigned to that community.
And as part of these events, a base of operations is established to provide space for client interactions. We identified the Arco gas station on Home Avenue with permission from the property owner. An array of resources were co-located on site, including our county staff, public health nurses, case managers, and La Maestra Community Health Center's mobile medical unit. Clients were also provided hygiene kits, refreshments, and sack lunches, as well as access to basic essentials like socks, and et cetera. Outreach activities and care coordination was reviewed on a daily basis with the group, and we identified any necessary changes or improvement in real time. The encampments were comprised of single adults, couples, or households with familial relations, with the majority identifying the surrounding community as their place of residence. Although the event has concluded, outreach staff will continue to visit the site to monitor activity as well as to follow up with clients receiving services. Over the 2-week initiative, staff documented 118 client interactions, whereas 20 individuals are now enrolled in street-based case management and will continue to work with an outreach specialist to address their instance of homelessness. And last but not least, 10 single adults accepted placement into shelter. Next slide, please. On-site public health nurses and benefit specialists facilitated access to vaccines and supportive services. 25 clients were connected to public assistance programs such as County General Relief, CalFresh, and Medi-Cal. And then finally, 13 individuals agreed to receive their COVID-19 shot or their flu vaccine.
So to date, the following locations are frequented by outreach staff in Council District 9. In El Cerrito, on El Cajon Boulevard, from 54th Street to College Avenue, and Rolando Village, El Cajon Boulevard from College Avenue to 70th Street, as well as Clay Park, the U.S. Post Office, and it's a now closed business, but was formerly known as Instaprint. City Heights, we have Home Avenue, Hollywood Park, Azalea Park, and then El Cajon Boulevard from Fairmont Avenue to Menlo. In Corridor Community, 35th Street from El Cajon Boulevard to Adams Avenue and the Adams Avenue Community Park. In College area, we have El Cajon Boulevard from Montezuma to 70th and the College Rolando Library. And then Talmadge and Kensington, we have El Cajon Boulevard from Euclid Avenue to 54th Street, up to Monroe and back down around to Euclid Avenue. Council District 9 is currently serviced by 1.5 mobile homeless response teams. Again, these are the individuals providing street-based case management. And this staffing model will be increased by 1 additional outreach worker in the very near future as we work to fill open vacancies. 20% of the rapid response team's time is spent responding to service requests in the district, which equates to roughly an additional 2 full-time positions. We are definitely continuing to wrap up outreach operations, and we recognize that there are opportunities to increase outreach presence throughout the city with the goal of a really an equitable distribution of resources based on need. The following slide provides a summary of outcomes specific to the council district since the beginning of the fiscal year. From July 1st through November 15th, yesterday, we have 84 individuals currently enrolled receiving, with the mobile homeless response team, receiving street-based case management services. 71 individuals connected to the rapid response team. Again, these are individuals that were brought to our attention through service requests, through Get It Done, or referrals through 211. We've had 22 exits to permanent or longer-term housing, with an additional 21 currently pending. We facilitated 21 placements into shelter, and there was 233 instances of supportive services being provided. This includes documents and benefits, food and nutrition, hygiene and clothing, transportation, and identification. There's also 7 instances of supportive services being rendered, which included employment, legal, medical, mental health, and substance use services. Went a little bit too fast. The outcomes that we just reviewed really require a consistent approach, and as was highlighted earlier in our conversation, often take extended periods of time to not only build rapport with clients, but to also assist with identifying an appropriate housing solution. On average, placements into shelter is taking around 32 days, and placements into permanent housing is taking around 77 days. And this is a critical piece because it not only speaks to the high acuity of the clients that our staff are engaging, but the importance of a neighborhood-based approach to facilitating outreach activities. And that really provides that opportunity for that ongoing, consistent neighborhood engagement. So in addition to the Coordinated Street Outreach Program, the Housing Commission is also responsible for the administration of all city-funded shelter programs. Shelter services are an important part of the homeless crisis response system and often serve as that initial touch point for individuals experiencing homelessness, either for the first time or on a chronic condition. Each program employs a service model that revolves around housing first, low barrier operations, really in a client-centered fashion that recognizes the importance of a trauma-informed environment. So what does this mean? This means the shelters are focused on quickly identifying the most appropriate housing resource based on the individual specific circumstance, resources, and acuity. And in order to make shelter resources as accessible as possible, clients are allowed to enter the shelter with their pets or partner in co-ed facilities situations, as well as with their belongings. In line with best practices, supportive services are voluntary and provided in a way that is client-centered and recognizes the totality of the client's well-being. Although sobriety is not mandated, support staff continually engage clients who may be struggling with substance abuse to offer support and connections to specialized treatment programs. While at the shelter, clients really have access to an array of supportive services. This includes basic needs such as meals, showers, restrooms, and laundry facilities, case management staff to assist them in developing a housing plan and connecting them to those communities supports, as well as connections to substance abuse treatment and mental health care. Access to all city-funded shelters is facilitated through the Coordinated Shelter Intake Program managed by the San Diego Housing Commission. This provides a uniform process and a single point of contact for all outreach staff and our law enforcement partners to connect clients that they're engaging with the most appropriate and available shelter accommodation. The city's portfolio of shelters is comprised of 10 programs serving single adults, families with minor children, and transitional age youth. These programs really vary in size. They can be as small as 5 beds. They can be as big as over 300. And in the near future, we'll actually be opening up a new initiative in the Midway District of the Point Loma community. It was alluded to earlier during the presentation. And it's really is a collaborative effort between the city of San Diego and the county to provide a specialized intervention for individuals with co-occurring mental health and substance use issues. It really is the first operation in which the city and county have coordinated on a specific intervention, shelter intervention at this high level, and it's reflective of the changing needs we see among individuals experiencing unsheltered homelessness. In total, the city funds 1,258 shelter beds, 1,025 for single adults, 164 for families with minor children, and 69 for transitional age youth and unaccompanied minors. And transitional age youth are individuals 18 to 24. As of yesterday, shelter beds for single adults was at 98% capacity, families was at 74%, and transitional age youth at 83. And with that, I'll kick it back over to Lisa for a review of the Homelessness Response Center.
Thanks, Jonathan. And I just want to just highlight again the city's investment in shelter initiatives and the city's continued focus on investment around these initiatives. So those are the beds that are available today, but there's not a day that goes by that Hafsa, Tamra, myself, the county aren't talking about what's next, right? And I think I mentioned earlier that we are in a very good place in the sense that we don't have to choose between a crisis response and investment in long-term housing. We have a lot of money flowing into our system over the next year that we can do a lot with. But I want to be honest about some of the challenges, right? So before we just move on to the next thing, I want to talk about outreach. I want to talk about shelter. I want to talk about the services we provide and acknowledge that the more money we get, the more programs we stand up, the harder it is to find the staff to do this work. We have significant staffing challenges across our region. It is not unique to us as a region. Frankly, it's not unique to us as an industry. We've always, this is a niche industry. It's not an industry that everybody wants to work in. We need compassionate, passionate, driven people that want to do this work. We also want to make sure that we're investing properly and compensating properly to attract and keep people in this work. It continues to be a bigger and bigger challenge across our nation right now, both in workforce in general and particularly in the social services industry. So as we stand up programming, we may have a goal of getting a program up in 2 to 3 months, and it may in fact take 5 to 6, just because it takes that long to attract staff. And sometimes what that means is we're hiring staff away from other positions. So it's an area of investment by the county, by the commission, by the city, in really looking at how we develop our workforce too. And that's just sort of looking at this from a systems level, not an individual program, not how as individual, not that those individual programs' performance isn't important, but how the system performs and what the challenges that the system has are important to solve this problem long-term. So I want to talk about systems a little bit in the sense that the Homelessness Response Center is a new program that implemented earlier this year. It was really built on a foundation of a pilot that was conducted through the period of COVID, when COVID was at its worst. Operation Shelter to Home was the city's response to COVID in standing up a large socially distanced shelter at our convention center. Our convention center was not going to be bringing revenue, and in that time, our convention center staff and team know how to stand up almost like miniature cities in a couple of days. Tamara Kohler and I were around back in March of last year, working with the city leadership and the county leadership to really figure out what that looked like, to stand up something that could be viable during that time, working very close with Deanna, her team, public health, multiple providers, Father Joe's, Alpha Project, Veterans Village of San Diego, Path providing on-site services, case management. What it really did is centralize a lot of resources in one place. And it also created an opportunity to look at data and look at system performance in a different way. We piloted some things during that time that we had not had the chance to really push forward before. So taking the opportunity and frankly, the pressure that this crisis created to almost accelerate some of our activities around the community action plan and test and new practices. The Homelessness Response Center is a result of that. So one of the things that we identified were challenges in the way our system was working, were areas where the communication between partners broke down, where there were regulatory challenges that could have been resolved through waivers or requests for administrative changes, and watching and monitoring our system in a broad level. The Regional Task Force and the Housing Commission partnered together during that time to implement some of these new practices, to streamline what is referred to as the coordinated entry system process, which is a process that identifies housing resources for people that are eligible for longer term permanent housing options, and to stand up system navigators that really monitored someone's progress through their pathway to housing. So not necessarily providing direct case management themselves, but checking in with the housing resource, checking in with the shelter or the outreach team that was working with that client, identifying what their challenges were, problem solving those challenges, and where those challenges were bureaucratic in nature or regulatory, filtering that up to a policy team that worked on how we could eliminate those issues, ask for waivers, work with our leadership partners at the VA or the county, or, frankly, sometimes within the own housing commission. Sometimes our own processes can be streamlined and made better, and really working to stand up a systems navigation approach to make sure that people were moving through the system as quickly as possible, and to create strong partnerships and support for our shelter providers that frankly sometimes are pressed to get all of that work done. They have staffing issues themselves and have done all throughout COVID. So plugging the gaps in case management where we could and providing support to shelter providers. The Homelessness Response Center is open 5-6 days a week. It's right down on Imperial Avenue in the East Village, so a lot of need there. You can access it through email, you can access it through the phone, you can access it by showing up at the door. Our focus is, of course, around diversion, keeping people from entering the homeless crisis response system in the first place, looking at ways that we can divert them into another longer-term housing options, crisis response and stabilization through the coordinated intake process, as Jonathan mentioned, through shelter placement, through case management and outreach support if folks don't want to go into shelter. Our shelters are at a really high capacity right now, but we have to honor that there's always the possibility that there are perceived concerns about shelter. Maybe someone who's never entered shelter before doesn't know what that's going to be like, or maybe they have certain types of trauma that they've experienced that means being in a congregate setting really isn't going to work for them, or they need a much smaller setting, or they have unique needs. Some of those needs are basic activities of daily living. There are folks on our streets today that really need like adult independent living care or nursing home care. And our shelters are not well situated to meet those needs right now, which is why, as I mentioned earlier, we're all having those conversations regularly, and the city is so focused on standing up resources that meet those special needs. We have 11 service providers on site. We have a lot of other service provider partnerships that we work with. We focus on housing assessment and placement. We work on care coordination, really doing whatever we can to streamline and expedite that pathway to housing for those folks that walk through the door, and for those shelter providers and outreach teams that we work with on system navigation. We also have system advisory groups working very closely with our representatives of persons with lived experience and the existing network that exists there, working with frontline staff to understand their needs and challenges so that when we're developing programs at a policy level, they also make sense on the ground and are informed by frontline work, and working with our leadership groups as well. Let's jump to the next one. So permanent housing solutions. We've talked a lot about crisis response. The other thing, of course, is investment in permanent housing solutions. And you're going to hear the same thing around investment from the city, investment from the commission, the county, RTFH's focus and support in that area. There's a lot of funding coming from the state and federal level. Rapid rehousing is what's considered a shorter term rental assistance program. It runs anywhere generally from 6 to 24 months. So it's really aimed at folks that have been economically displaced and maybe need a shorter term, moderate to light case management services, initial rental assistance that tapers down over time and really elevates them to be up and on their own again, living in the private market in their own unit without housing assistance over time. Some positives in regards to eviction moratoriums is it means that we have seen less people becoming economically displaced into homelessness right now. But we also know that COVID has had a negative impact on employment and wage earners. So we are seeing people that are accessing our rapid rehousing programs staying in there longer. The longer those folks are, certain households are in that rapid rehousing, we can't turn that over to someone else, right? So we're serving with the same funding, slightly less numbers of households because we're serving them longer to make sure that they're stable. That's just sort of the trade-off of those impacts. A lot of funding coming in, but also impacts to people's income. Permanent supportive housing is what's considered sort of the gold standard higher level intervention around housing resources. It's long-term housing subsidy, so there's no term limit on the housing, and it includes what's called wraparound services. And those wraparound services means that there are supportive services on site with that permanent supportive housing community to provide the level of resources necessary for that person to stabilize over time. There are some permanent supportive housing programs that are tenant-based. That means the tenant takes a voucher and moves into a private market unit, and case management is provided one-on-one. There are other projects that are community-based, which means the entire community or a part of the community is permanent supportive housing, and those supportive services are available on site. The Housing Commission has over 4,700 housing vouchers committed to addressing homelessness out of the just under 16,000 vouchers that we administer. Well, let's be honest, that's not going to solve all of the problems, right? Housing vouchers are a long-term investment. This really is funding from our federal government to stand up more of those resources. That's critical. We received 490 emergency housing vouchers from HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, this year, which we are already deploying. We received those in July, but that's a drop in the bucket compared to need. From an affordable housing perspective, we have over 90,000 households on our housing choice voucher waiting list, just for that information. We also focus on affordable housing development, so creating more housing units. This is in partnership with the state and the city as well. The city also stands up their own investments around affordable housing units for their economic development department. We have over 4,000 units that we own and manage. And then through our partnership developments, over 1,300 created in fiscal year 2021 and another 2,900 in the pipeline. Still, we understand that the need exceeds the resources that are available. So as part of our strategic planning efforts and the city and the region's strategic planning efforts, that's a constant look at investments and opportunities coming down from state and federal grants. But those are important because in order to create flow through from our shelter system, we have to create opportunities for people to move into. So we need to create those exit strategies. Rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, affordable housing are part of those exit strategies. So is harm reduction strategies. So is adult independent living care, nursing home care, board and care facilities. We need to understand that from a housing first perspective, and I know that someone mentioned housing first earlier in the chat. Housing first is a principle. It's about not creating burdensome requirements to getting into housing, that housing should be accessible to everyone. But housing first is not a one size fits all. It's about having the right intervention to meet that person's needs so they have the best opportunity to be successful and stable. And that means that from an investment perspective, the conversation always has to be around which resources do we need to be investing in. And it needs to be a spectrum from rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, affordable housing, board and care, nursing facilities. We need a spectrum of resources to best meet people's needs. The coordinated entry system is noted on here as well, which is a critical component to accessing permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing. And I am not going to speak to it when we have an expert on the line who can speak to it better, Tamara.
Well, thank you. Coordinated entry is a process. I think when people think about it as a system, they think about it as, you know, something that is happening in a maybe electronic way or in the background, but it's actually infrastructure planning. Coordinated entry is a way for us to collect information about individuals experiencing homelessness and prioritize them for the limited housing resources that we have. A couple of things that make it unique. It's not a waiting list. So it isn't like our Section 8 waiting list that we're familiar with that is based on where you got in the queue. It literally is a dynamic process of prioritization that is based upon their vulnerabilities or their greatest needs and prioritizing them for the most appropriate housing resources. There's a lot of work that goes behind that, a lot of engagement, but it is a, you know, really complicated and complex, but in the simplistic way of thinking about it, it's a triage tool. It's a little bit like if you went to the emergency room and you're going to triage not who showed up first, but who's of greatest need, and organizing our resources and the needs of individuals in that way. It's also really important that the coordinated entry system or practice or process is an engagement with an outreach individual or a case manager at a program. So its connection to the system is a really important piece of that. And it is something that we need to do more intentionally of getting people connected to those emergency services and then on the pathway to ending their homelessness. Not everyone will need a housing resource, but those that do, it's coupled with the right housing resource along with the right level of support. So it is a process and practice that is used for us to try and do our very best to honor the greatest needs in our community to get those really limited resources. And as Lisa said, the more that we can get more resources, more shelter, more housing, the more coordinated entry can spread out those limited resources to house more people. And I think sometimes there's that misnomer that coordinated entry is the pathway to housing. It is the path that we use towards housing, but it's housing resources and more housing and in a greater abundance that is needed to really open up that spigot and be able to end more homelessness. So really kind of short, down and dirty, very complex, but think of it as triage is the best way to think about it. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Tamara. I threw you on the spot there. Ah, there we go. So this is this PowerPoint is obviously going to be shared following this presentation. I think that was mentioned in the chat earlier. We have some links on here that we think are valuable to folks. General information around our homeless services and program dashboard, our community action plan on homelessness dashboards. Also, just for those that are on this slide as well, we didn't speak to it, but the Housing Stability and Assistance Program in partnership with the city is a really critical piece of the work to make sure that we prevent people from falling into homelessness after the impacts of COVID. So that is still up and running on our website, over $100 million that has been pushed out to people in need of rental assistance, and those applications are still open. So that is there, as well as some general information. And I believe, Jonathan, that concludes our presentation, so we can hand it back to Mary Ann.
Thank you all. So we are right on time. Wow, that's incredible. We're exactly to the dot. So thank you all so much. You are excellent presenters. You moved along really quickly through a lot of great information and a lot of insightful knowledge that you shared with us. So we know that that was a lot. And as you all were sharing, there's also many questions that came in the chat. I know several of us have been in the chat trying to respond to them in real time, but we know that there are a lot that we weren't able to get to. So now is the time for us to be able to capture those. But before we do so, I do want to review some community guidelines just so that we can all make sure that we are mindful and respectful of one another. So we're going to do our best to really respond to the questions first that came in the chat. If you would like to speak, feel free to drop it in the chat, but to make it easiest, it is just simpler for us to just follow questions that are written in the chat. We want to make sure that if someone is speaking, we don't interrupt one another. So one person, one mic. And when you're not speaking, to please make sure to keep yourself on mute. Be mindful of, we are all trying to learn one another, and we're all very passionate about this topic for various reasons. And we want to make sure that we communicate with courtesy and respect, and that as best as possible, we wanted to be tolerant to one another's viewpoints. We know there's a lot of passions and insights and perspectives that are in this space today. So while that is happening, if you haven't already dropped your questions in the chat, I encourage you to do so. I also wanted to make note that I know some of you, when you registered for the forum, you had forwarded your unique link to other folks so that they can log in. I do want to flag that if you logged in through someone else's link, so you're going to have the same name as that person. So we want to make sure that if there are questions we missed, that we follow up with the right person. Otherwise, the 3 individuals with the same name or that one person's email address is just going to get all those questions. So we want to make sure that if you haven't already, to confirm that the name that is on the screen for you is your name. And if you have any difficulties, you can just feel free to message one of our colleagues. Brett has been active in the chat. You can message him your contact address, and we will make sure that we have that contact on our side. So before we get into the Q&A itself, I wanted to introduce Curtis, who hasn't had a chance to speak. Curtis, if you're able to just give a couple of minutes introducing yourself as one of the esteemed panelists with a lot of the presenters we've been lucky to hear from, who have been lovely. So I'll turn it over to Curtis if you want to just give a little intro to yourself.
All right, great. Thank you. My name is Curtis. I am the director of All of Us or None San Diego chapter. All of Us or None is an advocacy group for formerly incarcerated people and their families. So our concerns primarily are towards formerly incarcerated people on housing, employment, healthcare, and whatever else other challenges that they may have in the community. Currently I'm working with the RTFH. When I was first contacted by Chris and Tamara, I had doubts because I have been part of the system. I've been homeless, and I have also been part of the criminal justice system. And we don't really have a lot of faith in agencies and programs and the people who say what they're doing and what they want to do. We primarily are kind of like activists. and who shy away from that. But I was so impressed by the Regional Task Force for Homelessness and because of their genuine concern. And they didn't talk about what they have done and what's working, but they address what's not working. And that was something that was right up my alley. We address on this committee what's not working and what we can do to make it work. Because despite all the good things that are going on, there's still a homeless problem, and it's huge. And there's still a lot of things happening, so we can paint this big picture and candy coat everything, but we can address. And that's what the RTFH, the committees that we have formed and the outreach that we have formed to do. And that's why I'm proud to be a part of that, because I wouldn't be a part of it if it wasn't, if it was being done anywhere else, any other type of way. So the RTFH has formed a committee to address homelessness. We do actual outreach and where we recently went out and we asked people, what's not working for you? What's not working? Because I know what didn't work for me. Last year I was homeless. So after 20 years of going in and out and experiencing this, I was surprised that some of the same issues still exist today, despite the fact that there's so many different programs. There's still the same concerns of a lot of the people that we did outreach and talk to still exist, with complaints on access to resources, obstacles and challenges on obtaining those resources and not being able to get in there, so I'm just, there is some good things, that are going on, but I'm really happy to be a part of it. And I'm glad that we're here having this conversation. I really respect everybody that's here today that's a part of this. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Curtis, for introducing yourself. And I do have one question before we jump into the other questions. Thank you for being, honest and also for sharing your story. I think storytelling is really powerful in this work as well. As someone who, as you mentioned, has been impacted by the system, has been impacted by homelessness up until even recently, what is a common misperception or just view that folks have when it comes to homelessness that you might want to share with folks tonight?
One common thing is that homeless people don't care. They want to be homeless. They don't really mind being homeless. And because of homeless being in this position, we can't turn anything down. It's like, okay, we offer you to go to this shelter. If I say no, I don't want to go to that shelter. Oh, he doesn't want help. See, look, you guys, he doesn't want to go to the shelter. See, I told you, they don't want help. They want to be homeless. But we address, just like what the RTF committee does, we address reasons why. We don't just stop at that question of him or her not wanting to go. We want to know why. And you'll be surprised that there are a lot of different reasons why people don't want to do things. I seen a guy recently pull up on a homeless person and he had a doggy bag of food where he just came from a restaurant and he didn't want it. And he pulled up and he went to the person who was sitting down by the tent and handed it and said, look, this is a steak. I just came from the steakhouse, I couldn't finish it, man. It's a steak. Here you go. And the homeless person popped the lid and looked at it and he said, hey, man, I'll pass, and the guy was really upset, because he felt like he offered him something and he should not turn down leftover food that he's been eating off of. So it's like, oh, he's not really hungry then. He doesn't want help because he turned down my food that I try to give him. So a big misperception about homeless people is that we don't want help, and that we are comfortable in the position that we are in.
Thank you for sharing, Curtis. We appreciate that. So one of the questions that we came in earlier that hasn't been answered yet, which I think is a great place to start from. Theolinda, I think, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, asked, would it be possible to walk us through a scenario? There's a lot of different programmings we talked about and the way that different folks had, broken down their programming, but Theolinda asked, can you walk through a scenario where when a Get It Done report is submitted to the timeline of the services that are provided to our neighbors experiencing homelessness? And is there a record of those who refuse services as well?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. So through the Get It Done app, as we discussed, those service requests are initially reviewed by the rapid response team. These are individuals that provide services across the city. And when they receive these service requests, the goal is within a 48-hour time frame to be able to get out and initially assess and triage that situation. So this entails touching base with the client, going to the location of concern, engaging with individuals in that area, providing immediate resources, whether that's around basic needs, or trying to assist in getting them into an emergency shelter option if that's something that they're interested in. If through those conversations, either initially or some subsequent follow-ups that's also built into the process, if the client is interested in and avails themselves to street-based case management, staff will then provide a soft handoff from the rapid response team to the street-based case management team assigned to that community or council district. And from there, it really varies based on the individual's specific circumstance, what resources they have available, and what are the appropriate housing solutions for that specific individual. Just based on the data that we were looking at, those placements definitely take some time from that initial point of contact and providing street-based case management. It can take upwards of 70 days. And it's not really just a reliance on subsidized housing solutions. It really is taking a focus and seeing how can we, one, divert this individual from the crisis response system, and what other housing solutions are available? Can we reunite this individual with their family? Are there room sharing situations within this individual's budget that would work? So it's really taking a comprehensive look at that individual's, point in time and working with them to develop a specific housing plan.
Jonathan, I want to say thank you for giving such a great explanation there. And from the city's perspective, I want to echo Curtis's words. Curtis, those are very powerful words in terms of what is working, what's not working. And I want to remind that the Get It Done is an initiative from the city's collaborative interdepartmental efforts from our performance and analytics with the new Department of Homelessness to see how things are working. We did a soft launch, so I know there's been quite a bit of frustration throughout on Get It Done requests being put in and the response times. But this is what exactly, I think, to Curtis's point, we're figuring out what's working, what's not working, how we can inform our additional programs and services, how many additional outreach workers we need, and really begin to look at capacity. So I think it's sometimes important to also note that these kind of developments help guide us for future developments to help support the work we're doing collectively.
And those service requests really help inform our ongoing discussions around resource allocation. As those requests come in, they really identify either emerging or reinforce our existing understanding of focus areas throughout the community. And, success on our end is really making that initial touch point. So when we receive that service request, the individual may not be gone. We will make contact with those individuals and continue to engage and provide street-based case management with the ultimate goal of not just transitioning them across the street, but to a permanent housing solution.
Thank you so much, Jonathan and Director Keiko, for sharing. I really appreciate that. The next question that we received, and I think, Jonathan, you actually mentioned this in your presentation, but if you can just repeat again, how many outreach workers are in the Mid-City area?
So it's 1.5 full-time street-based case management personnel. And again, this will be supplemented by an additional full-time position in the coming weeks, month. as we work to fill new positions that came online as a result of the city's additional investments in outreach, the beginning of the fiscal year. And then about 20% of the rapid response teams time is spent responding to service requests in the council district, and that equates to about 2 full-time positions. So anywhere from, I would say, 3 outreach staff consistently in the community, with 1.5 providing that street-based case management.
Perfect. Thank you, Jonathan. A lot of questions have also come up around encampments in canyons. I was wondering if you are able to speak to how do you respond to or address encampments that occur in the canyon spaces within the district?
So it really starts off with an assessment of the area. There's these imaginary boundaries between jurisdictions that we have to work within, most often with Caltrans, which is why it's absolutely a critical initiative to have a partnership with CityNet and Caltrans to address those areas where traditionally outreach staff weren't going into. But in terms of open space encampments throughout the city, it starts off with that initial assessment, having outreach staff go assess the need, how many individuals are in that area, and then working collaboratively with partners to implement an approach. And I think the focused event in Council District 9 is a perfect example of that. The encampment that we focused along Home Avenue and in parts of Hollywood Park were encampment in nature in open space, primarily in the floodplains. So it's a little bit different of approach. These individuals have a greater sense of community, a little bit more mobile and things of that nature. So we really make sure that we tailor our approach and the resources we bring based on the populations that we identify in those areas.
Well, and I think, Jonathan, too, it's worth noting that a response to an encampment doesn't necessarily mean that outreach team resolves that encampment. That is the goal. The goal is to try to engage people in services and get people to take other options. But the social service-based outreach teams are not enforcement teams. That's not their role. We don't want that to be their role. That's not to say that there isn't a place along the spectrum of response for enforcement. And Captain, I bet you hear me heading your way. But it's not the response of those social service-based outreach teams, right? So they're going to do what they can to go in, engage, provide resources, connect people to other options, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to disappear.
And to that end, as we spoke to with the Focus Outreach event, staff are continuing to follow up on that location, that encampment, where there's 20 individuals receiving ongoing street-based case management. So I really appreciate you elevating that distinction, Lisa, because it's critical in understanding the expectations around this specific intervention.
Captain Takeuchi, looks like you're about to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me jump in there real quick. So I did see some chatter with concerns regarding encampments in these open space areas, canyons, fire hazards, and what have you. So when outreach groups are not successful in contacting unhoused individuals or getting placement, I do have officers that go out. We partner with our Environmental Services Division, which is a different department of the city. ESD is the acronym. And Environmental Services Division, we will go out, as officers will go out with code compliance officers with environmental services, and we will post encampments for abatement, for litter removal, for debris cleanup. The postings are done well in advance. We want individuals to know that we are going to be there, that they need to do the best they can to clean up that area, clean up their property, to declutter it, to make sure that it's not a fire hazard. And then once a posting is done and an appropriate amount of time passes, we will go back to the area with environmental services, and we will remove any litter, debris, anything that is left behind. If encampments are still there, if the people are still there, that is where our progressive enforcement will begin. If it's the first time we've contacted the individual will be offered shelter, will be offered services, and then will be given a warning about being in an area and possibly violating the law, which could be illegal lodging. Every subsequent contact thereafter, we progressively enforce. So the next contact we make, if the person is still there violating the law, we will issue an infraction citation. The next would be a misdemeanor citation, and subsequent contact could result in an arrest, a custodial arrest, which means that we place handcuffs and they are booked into jail. We don't want to get there. We want people to accept shelter. We want people to comply with the law. That's what we seek. We know that going to jail does not solve the problem at all. And so we do what we can. We get, again, we are seeking compliance, and every contact that we make through this progressive enforcement, the first thing that we do is we offer shelter placement. We will also make notification about storage facilities and availability of a storage facility if that's what they need and that's what they need assistance with storing their property. So, it's again, working through getting people being tenacious and making sure that we are trying to connect as best as we can.
And Captain Takeuchi, I'm just going to add on to that too, that the city and the new department, we're beginning to look at different strategies and solutions as it relates to encampments. We're not alone in this. This is all throughout, not only the country, but in California, on what our best practices for encampments. Many communities are experiencing it, but I want to reiterate is what Councilmember Ila Rivera reiterated as well. It's important to have that first touch of outreach and human-centered approach. And, when we look at illegal activity is illegal activity. So how can we make sure that we divert and provide the supportive services prior to that? And I think that one of the things you've seen in terms of the city and the collaborative efforts here is positioning outreach with CityNet as a new contractor and working in tandem with PATH and with Alpha and with Housing Commission and all the shelter providers like Father Joe's and whatnot. So it really takes a team approach, and that is what we're working through.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate your answer to that question. So we do have two individuals who would like to ask their questions locally instead of through the chat. I'm going to first turn it to Mohammed Badruni, and then after Mohammed, Robin Baker, you will be up as well.
Okay.
Mohammed,
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. My name is Mohammed Badruni, and I live in this area for mid-70s, first as a student, graduate student at San Diego State, and then as a homeowner in the Rolando area. And I can tell you, in the 70s and 80s, there was no homeless living in the area. And through the year, I have noticed that it's getting worse and worse with all of these programs, all of this initiative, it's complete failure. That's my assessment. I am sorry, I am very blunt, that it's not working and it will not work. And I did some research and reading, and I found out that there are other cities that are coming up with some programs that are more effective with more results. Houston, for example, and Bakersfield. So my recommendation to all of these experts and to the city officials is to send a team to either Houston or Bakersfield to study how their programs are effective and how they can possibly use them here in San Diego. Thank you. And also, by the way, I put the link on the chat for 2 articles that give more information about these 2 programs. And one title of the program is How Houston Was Successful and How San Diego Failed.
Thank you, Mohammed. Next, Robin, do you want to go? I think your head's still raised. Oh, you're on mute.
So how's that? Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, good. I appreciate being part of this forum and the efforts, the sincere, genuine efforts that everybody is making on this issue, but I'm just going back to ground zero, and I'll be blunt. It is simply not acceptable as a property owner to be worried about illegal encampments in the canyons near our homes. We've already had a fire, and to wait over 10 days to find out the status so to get it done and just hope that the encampment is abandoned. You've got to have a different approach for this. This is not go out and have a nice little chat and try to offer people services. This is a safety issue. And so I'm just frankly frustrated because I don't feel like anybody's listening to us, and we're just talking about beds and this and that. We just can't, the city just cannot allow people to decide to live outside and set up a camp in an encampment or open space. It's just not right. And I'm just gonna leave it at that. I'm hoping somebody will listen to me and somebody's gonna think about this issue, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Robin. So I will take it to the next question. There was a question that someone had also asked, and I can't recall if this was answered, but I will repeat it just in case. How would an individual experiencing homelessness that's already on HMIS ask for priority consideration if she has found a rental owner willing to accept a voucher from her if she has one? So I think that one might be more specific to the regional task force or housing commission, but that was a question that came in.
Yeah, and it was a question for me, and I've actually been messaging. It came in from Geraldine. We're going to connect her with Jenna Marie on our team. I was actually just messaging her to make some connection. A little bit more information is needed before we'd actually be able to answer that. This individual is connected with one of our community-based organizations. And so we want to make sure that case manager knows how to connect them with the right sort of system approach and then the resources. So we're going to follow up, get a little bit more information. Jenna Marie, I was just sending you her email address. So our Jenna Marie is on this and listening. And so we'll follow up and figure out what we can do to help.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Another question that has come in is when it comes to abatements of encampments. Someone asked, and I wonder if folks from the city could speak to it. What is the city budget for abating illegal camps and how long the abatement, should the abatement take? That was a question that I think Robin asked as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Robin, for your question. And I appreciate you taking your time and really expressing. I would love to meet with you as well and learn a little bit more. I will tell you this, our city's environmental services department manages the abatements. And when I saw that question, I went ahead and contacted them. So I will be anticipating a response, but it's also important to know that there's different kinds of abatements, one that happens on the regular with the ESD department and one that we've amplified in response to the homelessness crisis and outreach and services. So, I know some cities across the board, they've just kept it pretty basic, but we've actually amplified services to address the specific needs. So I look forward to receiving that and then potentially connecting with Marianne so we could connect offline and discuss further. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Keiko. Another question that we received beforehand, actually, from a constituent who wasn't able to attend, but was hoping this question could be answered, was how is the city and the county addressing the Shigella outbreak? And what are the steps that are being taken to prevent the outbreak from worsening?
That's a great question, and I can answer that as well. And I know Deanna's on the call, and we've been on regular weekly calls. So one of the most important ways to answer that is that we have not remained complacent or turned a blind eye. In fact, the city initiated conversations with the county to really figure out where from public health we're seeing some of the initial outbreaks. I will say that county public health, and I'm sure Deanna, you could expand on this a little bit more. This is obviously an infectious infection, obviously not as serious as COVID, but we do know that people experiencing homelessness may have more immunocompromised or just to not be in the being out in the unhoused population. So to answer your question, we do receive also, we put out collective press on our efforts. Some of those efforts have included additional hand washing stations in addition to the current hand washing stations that both the city and county have, and also strategic movement of those hand washing stations to ensure that there's accessibility and equity in accessing health care for the unhoused population. Number two, I will also say the addition of 3 portable restrooms that actually went live this past Monday. And also number 3, the education that we're working with the San Diego Housing Commission. Obviously, we've been very close in ensuring that the outreach workers are getting all of the public health guidance in terms of how to maintain clean and sanitary conditions, but also how they could access additional health care as needed. And we're doing that in conjunction with San Diego Housing Commission and also the outreach workers. I see Ketra and Jonathan nodding. I know they're out there making sure all the provider bases like PATH have the information. And then of course, we've connected with Tamara and her team to make sure that there is more information passed out from the network of our regional partners. So there's a plethora of different activated interventions that are happening. And I'd like to punt it to Deanna because I know she's been on those weekly calls. If you have anything additional from the county public health.
I think you captured it very well. So we met regularly. We ensure that interventions are targeted to the areas where those cases were first discovered. We're providing regular updates via our homeless sector. So some of you may know that the county has stood up sectors, and this was in response to COVID-19, but we also cover other outbreaks. And so we have been sending out through County News Center as well as the homeless sector regular updates on this particular item. And we have links to various, we have stood up a county website that has links to the infographic. I can drop that in the chat. Additionally, through the homeless sector, we've and Hamza, you may have mentioned this already, but we are assembling and sending out hygiene kits. So we've assembled additional probably about over 2,000 hygiene kits that have gone out countywide in the last couple of weeks in response to this. So, and then there will be another round going out this week. So just many efforts working together with our city partners. And there's also additionally, our Department of Environmental Health has sent out advisories and information to the local businesses, restaurants, anyone that is in affected areas. So, and those flyers and everything is also linked to the county webpage. I'll go ahead and drop it in the chat. But I think that covers it.
Thank you both so much. So I know we're almost out of time, and one of the questions that we wanted to make sure was also asked before we wrap up was, we know that obviously there's a lot of work happening. There's a lot of great stuff that you all have really talked about, but we also know we're not there. There's a lot that still has not been met. There are a lot of gaps that are still trying to be worked out, and there's just simply more that we need to do. And so I'm just kind of curious in hearing from those who wish to like to share sort of their perspective and expertise. What do we need to get to where we're aiming? You know, there's a lot of different solutions being proposed, a lot of different action items that are being taken, thoughts in the chat also from just different regions and how they've approached the homelessness crisis as well in their own areas. But I'm just kind of curious if folks want to, on the panel, be able to speak to what does it look like to get to a place where, you know, we're really have figured it out. You know, what are the things that we need in order to get there, and how especially can the community become involved in that work as well, so that residents who are feeling frustrated, but who also have compassion and understanding for the hardness and complexity of this work and are looking for a way to plug in, what are some of the ways they could also get engaged in the gaps that you all are seeing? So I'll open it to the entire floor for anyone who's interested in answering that.
Well, I will chime in on that one. I believe that in order to at least make some progress, that a lived experience people are important to have, not just to ask a couple of questions to one day, but to actually have and be a part of agencies and housing providers to actually work in those capacities and to be hired on to work. This is not a job pitch for me, but I am saying that it is necessary to have lived experience people there working, because we seem to be used at times, but not all the time. So if you really want a program to succeed in substance abuse, programs that I've been in, all of the counselors were previously addicts themselves. And these programs were the best because you couldn't pull the wool over their eyes. They understood what you were going through. They understood what was needed to get them through. Lived experience people are needed in these positions. Now, a lot of lived experience people have past also that may prevent them from acquiring these positions if there are issues with that. But in some form or capacity, lived experience people should have more engagement and involvement in these programs.
Curtis, I want to speak to your point about not only involving the voice, but also that's where a lot of the expertise lies, right? And when you mentioned like past that might prevent employment, that's something as employers that we need to consider too. We know that persons experiencing the system themselves are the best to speak to the challenges for it. We know that persons experiencing other challenges, like you said, around substance use disorder are some of the best to turn around and provide counseling. And the program that we stood up with San Diego City College, the peer program, which is basically a foundational course around homelessness to try to attract people in the industry. We did it at City College because it's accessible and it's affordable and it has a diverse student body and community, and we want to draw people into this work. I just want to acknowledge someone mentioned some of the challenges around the opioid crisis and fentanyl. And I want to call out the County of San Diego for their harm reduction strategy and framework that they've been developing over the last many months now. And the efforts that they have put together in that space is pulling together the fact that homelessness is unique to each individual and different individuals need different things. So we want to make sure that we have the right resources available to them. So just want to note that one of the things that works in solving is identifying and talking about the problems in the first place. And the county is really leaning into that work, as is the city and the RTFH, around equity and around a multiple system response to homelessness, so that we're bringing in the right healthcare resources, the right triage, and the right supports to make people successful. But if we don't talk about our challenges, then we can't solve for them. And I really appreciate, Curtis, what you brought forward. John, I saw you wanted to speak, and I'm going to stop talking because I know we don't have a lot.
Well, thanks. I want to agree with Curtis, I'm also very appreciative of the work that both the city and the county are doing to focus on specialty needs shelters and addressing some of the crisis. I mean, look, the opioid epidemic and addiction and alcohol has affected all of us. The difference is that we see it on our streets more than we see it in our neighbors, because they're able to hide behind a closed door. But I also want to add that the other big thing you could do, one of the reasons that we don't get housing in place, or we don't get a shelter in place, or we don't get a service center in place, is because of community resistance. If you really want to solve homelessness, you need to accept the fact that you need to embrace housing, because once somebody's housed, they're not homeless anymore. They're not living in your canyon. They're not living on your street. They're being served. They're being adequately managed. I mean, the majority of people that we see that are chronically homeless on our streets need permanent supportive housing. And these are some of the most difficult things to cite. So I really encourage everyone to accept and support of permanent supportive housing in your neighborhood, because that's the solution to homelessness.
Sean, I just want to say thank you for those powerful words. And, I think if we all can take a step back and, listen to Curtis, John, and even Councilmember Ela Rivera, he started this conversation about how it's personal to him. And I think what we see is a testimony of folks where it has worked. And, I'm part of that community as well. I grew up on Section 8. I grew up in the projects. And if it were not for those services, me and my family would have continued to live in a car. And so here's another testimony from lived experience that it works and you could see people thrive. And I think so often we see folks out on the streets, and of course there's compassion fatigue, and we only see those situations, but we do want to elevate the success stories that it does work one person at a time with the dedication. So I wouldn't be here if it was not for those programs and services. And I just want to say that these dedicated outreach workers, I said it today real quick. There was a guy got a LinkedIn request from a woman who's a paralegal who used to be an unhoused person I worked with about 7 years ago. And she said, Hafsa, I'm a paralegal now. We've been through so much, and now she's on like, so sometimes I think it's that level setting that it may not happen. Homelessness didn't start overnight, and it's not going to end overnight. All we can do is work as hard as possible collectively, and it truly is a collaboration.
Thank you all so much. That was such a powerful way to conclude. I know we only have a couple more minutes, so I want to leave this space for some closing remarks from our panelists. And then we also have the lovely Stephanie Estrada, who is here on behalf of Mayor Todd Gloria as well. But before I toss it to Stephanie, are there any closing remarks that our panelists would like to share with us before we end tonight?
If I may, I think one of the things that we have heard, this is a really challenging experience for everyone, for citizens, for those trying to deliver the services. But I want to highlight two things. We've heard of some really personal experiences, but I can tell you, knowing Curtis, he's an accomplished advocate, an accomplished writer. He's published. He brings so much to this work, as does John Brady. And I offer these two things. Neither of these individuals chose to be homeless as their housing solution. Both struggled with our system. Both voices are important and critical, but what they needed most was a community to embrace the services and needs that they needed. Housing, employment, right? Embracing them as a part of their community. If we can find that space, all of the other things that we talked about, all of the plans, all of the funding, all of those spaces are exponentially more successful, because every day that we have a system that we're helping individuals, those individuals, believe it or not, are fighting equally as hard to survive. And what they really need to be able to do is have a place to recover and thrive and contribute back to the community. They bring so much to what we do. And there is so much that we can do, and being willing to site housing, to employ them, to embrace them and hear them. That makes our job so much easier. That makes all of the things that we talked about successes, if a community can embrace that it is their neighbors, their friends, their brothers and sisters in this work. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't highlight every day there are people who are having these successes. We need more of it tailored to their needs, and we need communities to embrace our own friends, neighbors, as really valuable to us.
Thank you so much. And I don't see anyone else raising their hand, so I will toss it over to Stephanie to please feel free to unmute and speak on behalf of the mayor. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you, Marianne. My name is Stephanie Estrada. I serve as the community representative for Council District 9 as well as 8 on behalf of the Mayor Todd Gloria. Marianne, thank you so much. You are just a wonderful host and you've been hitting the ground running. I just want to thank first and foremost Council District 9 and Councilmember Elo Rivera for just hosting this platform for community members to really speak on some of the issues and concerns that you all may have, and also for all of our service providers and the county and everyone here who has been able to partake in this conversation. And so first and foremost, I do want to send the regards to the mayor for not being able to attend attend today. On the mayor's behalf, I do want to provide a few words. You know, mayor has been leading with an approach with compassion, making sure that it's person-centered and neighborhood-based outreach. And, you know, he has really expanded investments, and particularly in this year's budget, investing $1 million in this year's budget to nearly double our concentrated street outreach program. He also has expanded workforce training on the peer program. I know, Lisa, you mentioned that, and that's a partnership between the Housing Commission and City College to just bring in more people into careers in case management and outreach. And he also has elevated the homeless strategies and solutions to a full city department and hired Hafsa Keika to run it and add several new positions to support her work. And she has really just hit the ground running with our team, particularly with our community engagement team. And she's been a great addition to our team. He also has overhauled our sidewalk cleanups to be just more responsive to the needs of people living unsheltered on our streets, and not in bad weather, not at night, better noticing, more clarity on how people can recover from their belongings. And basically the primary goal is just to really get people off the streets where it's unsafe to live. And we really just can't repeat hepatitis A outbreak that did happen in 2017. And so I do want to also provide just more information that the mayor is really tackling it on all sides of the spectrum. Mayor did announce and unveil his Homes for All of Us package, which is an initiative to spur production of housing for people who simply can't afford in the city. And there are right now tens of millions of state dollars that are on the way to fund permanent supportive housing for folks who are chronically homeless through Project Home Key. And so I really appreciate the folks that all tuned in today, Marianne, Council District 9, everyone here today for providing this space. And just know that the mayor is prioritizing compassion, connections to services at the same time, and just making sure that we keep everyone safe. So thank you all for having me, and thank you so much. I'll pass it back over to you, Marianne.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. So I know we're already over time, but I'm going to squeeze in, and we'll end it with this last question from Denise. She's been really urgently waiting to get it answered, so I do want to make sure she gets her question answered, and we'll wrap it right after this one. Go ahead, Denise. You're still on mute.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm not really Denise. She sent me the link. I'm Lupe Diaz, District 4. I know I don't live in your district. I'm a registered nurse for over 30 years. I understand all your programs. I've been through so many meetings. I'm part of the Oak Park Community Council. We have a facility here on Leah Street. I see a lot of the homeless issues. I see the drug addiction. I can understand the frustration of all these individuals that have spoken today, the people who have raised their hands. I don't understand. Here's my big question. There are so many unemployed nurses right now, new nurses that are fresh out of nursing school. Why can't the city bring nurses like together to like help these people come out to the streets, talk to them? We have really good, skills to talk to these folks. I would love to see a program, and you can tell this to the mayor. I would even help to do this. I'm a retired nurse, over 30 years. I've done every type of work in my life. Please, I beg of you, please use the nurses. We are really good at reaching out to folks. We're compassionate. People trust us. What can I say? The county only has like 50 or 40 public health nurses. There is no way that the county of San Diego can address these issues with 50, 40 public health nurses on their payroll. You need to have a brigade of nurses out there. Believe me, we can do a lot of change, and we're the backbone of the healthcare system. Please use us. That's all I have to say. And FYI, people, watch Dope Sick. It's an excellent series on Hulu if you have it. It really talks a lot about the opiate crisis in America. Please watch it. That's it. I'm done. Thank you very much.
Marianne, really quickly, I'm just happy to report that the CHART update that we provided earlier in terms of our partnership with the county does include the nurse practitioners and clinicians and mental health support systems and substance abuse counselors. So really excited to see those nurse practitioners and the CHART outreach teams come on board in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that, if you can hear me, but I think you need more. I really believe that you need more. This is an emergency situation, almost a FEMA type situation. Okay, I listened to NPR this morning, and the future mayoral candidate for Los Angeles called this a FEMA type crisis, homelessness. Okay, I just feel that you just need more nurses, more people, whatever you have, mental health counselors. This is a crisis, definitely a crisis. We have extra people coming on board when there's a flood, when there's an earthquake, when there's a natural disaster. This homelessness is a natural disaster. Believe me, it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. I appreciate you all being here so much.
I'm sorry, it's Lupe Diaz. I'm sorry.
Lupe. Sorry, keep getting
Lupe Diaz. Yeah, I signed into Denise's link. I didn't get it because I'm D4. And I'm very interested because we are at your border. We're on the border of D9. So I would really appreciate if you can have a forum too in D4. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Lupe. I appreciate that. I'm sorry, I keep getting distracted by the name. Thank you all so much for being here. Again, I know this wasn't enough time, and yet it was a lot of time. And I know it's just almost 8:10 on a Wednesday. So I value and really commend the commitment that all of you have for sticking it out, because I know it really shows a dedication to not only this issue, but really to your communities. And this is exactly what we mean when we say we come together as a collective. It's hard, it's tough, it's complex, but it's the way we do it. So I appreciate you all so much for being here. And I want to make sure that you're able to enjoy the rest of your Wednesday night. So please, thank you all so much. If you haven't already put your questions in the chat, I encourage you to do so. There is also the forum that we put in the chat as well. And we will make sure that any question that was unanswered that we get back to as best as we can from input from the partners and the incredible stakeholders that were here, and even those who could not be present but are still part of the work. So thank you all so much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and a good night.